Hello and welcome to the Framework. Today I'll be taking you through a research study published in the Journal of Administrative Sciences titled The Functions of a Servant Leader. The authors of this research paper are all faculty members at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. They are Michael Frederick Coetzee, Mark Boosen, and Madeline Gilden-Hayes. The aim of this study was to establish a framework that summarizes the functions of a servant leader, and more specifically, the study focused on defining the characteristics, competencies, and measures and outcomes of servant leadership as recently described in the literature. These characteristics, competencies, measures, and outcomes of servant leadership were used to conceptualize a framework to make servant leadership practical within organizations. I would add not only for organizations, but for those wanting to become a better leader, those who want to build better leadership programs, and companies who want to hire better leaders. For the past 4 decades, servant leadership has evolved as a reputable leadership theory and construct. Characteristics and measures of servant leadership are well described in the literature, and empirical research has stated more recently to show the positive impacts of servant leadership in individuals, teams, and organizations. Servant leadership offers a multidimensional leadership theory that encompasses all aspects of leadership, including ethical, relational, and outcome-based dimensions. The authors go on to say that it is similar to, but also different from current leadership theories, and proposes a more meaningful way of leadership to ensure sustainable results for individuals, organizations, and society. Servant leadership includes practices known to sustain high-performing organizations, such as establishing a higher purpose vision and strategy, developing standardized and simplified procedures, cultivating customer orientation, ensuring continuous growth and development, sharing power and information, and having a quality workforce. In addition, servant leadership showed to provide favorable individual and organizational outcomes such as enhanced corporate citizenship behavior, work engagement, organizational commitment, sales performance, and reduced turnover. Servant leadership can be defined as a multidimensional leadership theory that starts with a desire to serve, followed by the intent to lead and develop others to ultimately achieve a higher purpose objective to the benefit of the individual, organizations, and society. Although servant leadership was coined by Greenleaf in the 1970s, its original principles can be found in the Bible, in Greek and Chinese philosophy. Philosophers like and leaders like Marcus Aurelius, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Socrates, Aristotle, and others shared servant leadership principles well before Robert Greenleaf. Yet Greenleaf drew on these ancient philosophers and leaders and their text when developing the leadership theory that is now known as servant leadership. The most commonly cited definition of servant leadership in Greenleaf's writing is the following answer he gave to the question, who is a servant leader? Greenleaf stated, the servant leader is servant first. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from one who is leader first, perhaps because of the need to assuage an unusual power drive or to acquire material possessions. For such, it would be a latter choice to serve after leadership is established. Serving is the mindset. It reminds me of the quote from Zig Ziglar that a friend and leader of mine loves. It goes like this: you don't build a business, you build the people, and the people build a business. To me, this quote that is beloved by my friend Scott Hicks encompasses the mindset and belief of a servant leader. I also love that the authors added this description of servant leader by Peter Northouse, where he states, servant leadership is an approach to leadership with strong altruistic and ethical overtones that asks and requires leaders to be attentive to the needs of their followers and empathize with them. They should take care of them by making sure they become healthier, wiser, freer, and more autonomous so that they too can become servant leaders. I have heard by many people in leadership roles, senior director level, that say, servant leadership really, they can't run an organization because they're too soft. They acquiesce to the employees. They don't hold them accountable. They don't set standards. And I would say nothing can be further from the truth, which is why I love this description of servant leadership. First, servant leaders, based on the research along with transformational leadership, have been shown to drive performance better than any other style. As well, as you will see in this study and in others, they enhance employee engagement, well-being, belonging, inclusion, innovation, and create strong cultures. Servant leaders, as Northouse stated above, is to make people healthier, wiser, freer, and more autonomous. If we apply this to situational leadership, I cannot take somebody from D1 to D4 on a skill, task, or goal if I'm soft. I have to set expectation. I have to provide clear direction. I need a coach, mentor, to help that person become more confident and develop competence. Servant leadership isn't soft, as this study will show, and others have shown, that it is one of the two best styles that an organization, a country, or a team can be led by. The authors state that servant leadership cuts across a variety of leadership theories, but is unique in the sense of its philanthropic characteristics, leadership intent and focus, and its multidimensional leadership attributes. It focuses, as we said, on serving people first, aims to achieve an extraordinary vision that creates value for the community, and includes situational, transformational, as well as personal trait dimensions of leadership. For example, the servant leadership theory shares similarities with transformational leadership in the way it focuses on people and results, but it's different because it focuses firstly on people and implies a different leadership intent. It also differentiates itself from transactional leadership in the serving practice it applies to achieve results. Servant leadership also includes the relational aspects of leader-member exchange to build relationships. It uses the principles of situational leadership to develop people, applies authentic attributes of authentic leadership, supports the collaboration aspects of enterprise leadership, includes some of the components of level 5 leadership that Jim Collins described in Good to Great, and shares spiritual traits of spiritual leadership. However, servant leadership is much more comprehensive and includes other important dimensions of leadership that are missing from other leadership theories. So the authors reviewed many studies to develop this research. They looked at hundreds and hundreds of different studies and boiled it down to 87 really high quality studies, and they did a really great job of really finding the best studies that helped them really develop the characteristics, competencies, measures, and outcomes of servant leadership that were from research and from the literature. The 4 questions they really wanted to answer from their literature review were: what are the characteristics of a servant leader? What are the components of what are the competencies of servant leadership? How is servant leadership measured? And what organizational outcomes are linked to servant leadership? So let's start by looking at the characteristics of servant leadership found in this literature review. And they identified 8 characteristics of a servant leader: authenticity, humility, compassion, accountability, courage, altruism, integrity, and listening. Strong evidence was found for all of these servant leadership characteristics within the literature. Let's start by looking at authenticity and humility. Authenticity was described in the literature as showing one's true identity, intentions, and motivations, adhering to strong moral principles, being true to oneself. It was also seen as being open to learn from criticism and having consistent behavior. Humility was defined as being stable and modest and with a high self-awareness of one's strengths and development areas, having a humble attitude, being open to new learning opportunities, and perceiving one's talents and achievements in the right perspective. Humble leaders value and activate the talents of others. They enjoy helping others succeed and give credit to others when a task is completed successfully. Humility was also described as a virtuous attitude that uses potential power to advancement of others. Compassion was perceived in the literature as having empathy, caring for others, being kind, forgiving others for mistakes, accepting and appreciating others for who they are, and showing unconditional love towards others. Additional keywords referenced in the literature to describe compassion were to value people, to serve others, putting others first, and being good to others. Emotional healing also seemed to be closely related to compassion. It was described as helping others recover from hardship or difficulties, having a concern for the professional health care of others, being sensitive towards others, assisting in healing relationships, and healing oneself and others to become whole. Accountability was described in the literature as being responsible, ensuring transparent practices, holding others accountable, monitoring performance, and setting clear expectations in accordance with an individual's capability. Courage was defined as being open to taking calculated risks, standing up for what was morally right, and having high ethical conduct. Altruism was described as being others-oriented, selfless, having the desire to positively influence and help others become better in life by serving their needs consistently. This behavior extended to make positive differences not only in people, but also in organizations and in society. The key words referenced to describe integrity in the literature were being honest, fair, having strong moral principles, behaving ethically, creating an ethical work climate. Listening was described as a deep commitment of a leader to listen actively and respectfully by asking questions to create knowledge, providing time for reflection and silence, and being conscious of what is left unsaid. This study made a distinction between characteristics and competencies of a servant leader. A characteristic was perceived as a personality trait that regulates the way a person thinks, feels, and behaves. Competencies, on the other hand, was understood as a combination of cognitive and technical knowledge, skills, traits, and habits applied to achieve a specific standardized outcome. These distinctions are helpful for those building leadership development programs or for those hiring leaders within an organization. I really believe if you understand the characteristics and competencies, then it's easier to identify, build, and value these within an organization. The authors also showed strong evidence found for the following four servant leadership competencies. They are empowerment, stewardship, building relationships, and setting a compelling vision. Let's first take a look at empowerment. Empowerment was defined by researchers as a commitment to the process of developing others to prosper personally, professionally, and spiritually, having a transformational influence on followers, transferring responsibility and authority to followers, providing clear direction and boundaries, aligning and activating individual talents, sharing information and encouraging independent problem solving, providing a necessary coaching, mentoring, and support according to the needs of the individual, creating an effective work environment, building self-confidence and well-being, and proactive follower behavior, helping followers mature emotionally, intellectually, and ethically. So let's take a look at stewardship. Stewardship was divided in the literature as a process of taking accountability for the common interests of society and organization and individuals alike, and to leave a positive legacy with an attitude of not being the owner, but rather a caretaker. Building relationships was defined by literature as the process to build trustful relationships with individuals, customers, and community, creating an environment of care, support, and encouragement and acknowledgement, communicating effectively by spending quality time with followers to share and create knowledge, understanding the needs, aspirations, potential of others, and working in collaboration and having common values. Finally, setting a compelling vision was described as the ability to conceptualize a higher purpose vision to link past events and current trends with potential future scenarios. They also looked at leadership outcomes, the outcomes of a servant leadership, which were divided into three different categories: individual outcomes, team outcomes, and organizational outcomes. Let's take a look at what the authors found in this extensive review of the literature that pertains to these three categories. The authors found that servant leadership positively impacted individual outcomes related to work engagement, organizational citizenship behavior, innovative behavior, organizational commitment, trust, self-efficacy, job satisfaction, personal job fit, person-organizational fit, leader-member exchange, and work-life balance. Furthermore, it was negatively related to burnout and turnover. Servant leadership was also negatively correlated with disengagement. I think we have all seen the Gallup survey on global engagement. The most recent survey showed that the impact of disengagement on the global economy was estimated at $7.8 trillion. That, folks, is a lot of money. Servant leadership increases engagement. They increase innovation. They develop confidence and competence within employees, which all lead to a very strong organization and a very competitive one as well. So team outcomes of a servant leader. They were positively related to four team or group outcomes, namely group organizational citizenship behavior, group identification, service climate and culture, procedural justice climate. So I looked up procedural justice climate. I kind of knew what it was, but I want to make sure I gave you the right definition. So procedural justice climate, also known as procedural fairness, describes the idea of how individuals regard the justice system is tied more to the perceived fairness of the process and how they were treated, rather to the perceived fairness of the outcome. So if we think about servant leaders and their ability to drive collaboration, to solve problems as a team, to set team identities, to set standards, build psychological safety, and other positive team aspects, they're all related to servant leadership. Organizational outcomes were defined by the authors in two different areas: customer service and sales performance. Servant leadership was positively related to customer service performance, service-oriented organizational citizenship behavior, customer value co-creation, customer trust in the firm, customer satisfaction, customer orientation, customer serving behavior, and value-enhancing behavior. Servant leadership was also negatively related to customer turnover. Servant leadership also affected sales performance in various ways. In numerous studies, they show that it increased sales performance directly. Another study indicated that the ethical climate mediated the relationship between servant leadership and sales performance. Servant leadership was also positively related to asserting culture, which in return enhanced organizational performance. Customer orientation was also positively influenced by servant leadership, which produced higher outcome performance. So happier employees who trust the organization, are developed by that organization, who have a clear purpose, also drive higher performance, driven by happier, valued, well-treated customers who trust the company. It's not hard to imagine why servant leadership has such a profound effect not only on individuals, organizations, society, but at performance of these companies as well. The authors then describe the strategic and operational impact of servant leaders. Strategic servant leadership was divided into two main functions: to set, translate, and execute a higher purpose vision, and to become a role model and ambassador. One of the servant leaders' competencies identified by the results was to set a compelling vision for an organization. It is important to note that vision consists of three major components, namely, 1, a higher purpose vision, create value for the community and organization, and linking past, present, and future together. A higher purpose vision is worthless without translating it and executing it. So it is vital for a servant leader to translate the vision into workable goals that is clearly understood by its followers. This process involves translating the vision into a mission, strategy, and practical goals. It also includes designing the capability and capacity frameworks, as well as processes, policies, and systems to support the vision, mission, and strategy. This process of developing the capability and capacity frameworks and supporting it with the relevant processes, policies, and systems relate well to factors of high-performing organizations and teams, such as establishing and communicating a clear vision, mission, and strategy, being customer-oriented, having simple, standardized, and innovative processes and systems, ensuring continuous learning and development, and sustaining a high-quality workforce. It also relates well to the McKinsey 7S model that suggests an integration of 7 factors to enhance organizational effectiveness, namely strategy, style, skills, systems, structure, staff, and shared values. In summary, a servant leader applies courage and altruism to set, translate, and execute a compelling vision to benefit of employees, organizations, and society. The researchers also identified 4 general principles or practice that servant leaders also employ. They are self-knowledge, self-management, self-improvement, and self-revealing. Self-knowledge is about truthfully discovering one's own strengths and weaknesses in terms of values, personalities, abilities, and talents. Before a servant leader can show their own true identity, intentions, or motivations, they first need to know and understand what it is. The same is true in terms of individual talents. Before a servant leader can view their own talents and perspective, they need to know which talents they possess. When a servant leader becomes aware of their own strengths and weaknesses in terms of values, personality, abilities, and talents, they can become more authentic by showing their true identity, intentions, and motivations, and thus become more humble and putting their talents in perspective. As Aristotle once said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Self-management is about managing oneself mentally, emotionally, and physically that fosters optimal well-being and personal effectiveness. Servant leaders, the authors went on to show, should manage themselves well to show stable, modest, and consistent behavior. Stable and modest behavior is possible when servant leaders are in the right mental and emotional state, and consistent behavior is furthermore possible when a servant leader is physically, mentally, and emotionally well. Self-management can therefore be divided into 3 different categories, namely managing the mind, managing emotions, and managing physical health. Managing the mind refers to managing one's thoughts and cognitive activity to form new habits to ultimately enhance personal effectiveness. Managing emotions refer to emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. Emotional intelligence is a set of emotional and social skills to perceive and express oneself well, to build good relationships with others, to cope with difficult circumstances, to use emotions effectively. Emotional maturity is considered as being selfless, exercising self-control, not being easily offended. Servant leaders appraise and express emotions effectively, use emotions to improve cognitive processes and decision-making, and successfully regulate emotions by means of regular reflection. Managing physical well-being means to improve one's physical state to enhance personal effectiveness. By sustaining high levels of energy, ensuring work-life balance, and practicing healthy habits. Without physical well-being, servant leaders could find it difficult to serve others effectively. So let's look at self-improvement and self-revealing. Self-improvement refers to continuously develop personal development to enhance personal effectiveness and relevance. Servant leaders are humble and authentic enough that they know they need to continuously learn and develop, not only to stay relevant in this changing world, but also to have the capacity to develop others. Servant leaders are also aware of the fact that they cannot empower others if they are not competent themselves. Self-revealing refers to being transparent, showing one's true self, living the values set to support that higher purpose vision. This is part of being authentic. Servant leaders align their behavior with the vision and values of the organization and role model these to achieve that higher purpose vision. In summary, servant leaders use the characteristics of authenticity, humility, and integrity, as well as components of personal capability, and apply the principles of self-knowledge, self-management, self-improvement, self-revealing, and staying within the rules become role models and ambassadors for followers in line with that higher purpose vision. Once servant leadership provides strategic leadership by setting and translating a higher purpose vision and becoming role models for that higher vision. They start to apply the functions of operational servant leadership. In operational servant leadership, the hierarchy is flipped upside down, in which the servant leader then serves and empowers the employee to achieve the higher purpose vision. In this way, employees do not serve the leader in the expense of the customer, but the employees are served and empowered by the leader to render exceptional customer service in line with that set vision and to help followers become servant leaders themselves. As Zig Ziglar stated before, you don't build a business, you build a people, and the people build a business. Operational servant leaders help employees by creating a continuous improvement mindset. They monitor and improve mechanisms to ensure continuous growth and excellence. So recommendations from the author. Here are some recommendations from the author as they completed this study. They stated that the results of this study provide managers and practitioners with a possible outline to develop servant leaders within organizations. For example, the author suggests functions, objectives, characteristics, and competencies provided in this study could be used to design curriculums for servant leadership development programs. Management consultants and organizational development practitioners might also use the results to cultivate a servant leadership culture within an organization. The performance areas and functions of servant leaders provided in this study can be incorporated within recruitment, performance management, and remuneration systems of a company to select, review, and reward leaders. In return, management and other stakeholders could expect favorable individual, team, or organizational outcomes that servant leaders produce. There's a lot happening in our world which makes leading and managing very complex. It has always been complex, but I think even more so these days. How do companies stay competitive? How do they optimize employee engagement, enhance belonging, well-being of their employees while developing inclusive cultures, and then developing them for the future as well? How do we humanize technology to make it work to the better of our world and not just to increase profits and efficiencies? Leaders are having to lead in what has been coined a VUCA environment: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The anecdote for VUCA is a leader who can co-create a compelling vision, drive understanding, provide and communicate clarity, and develop agility within their organization. This is done by servant leaders, and those organizations who hire and identify servant leaders are the ones who are going to win in the future. The study I've just reviewed provides ample support of why servant leaders and servant leadership are needed in these turbulent times, but I would say in any time. There are two types of leadership styles that have shown to optimize performance, drive innovation, well-being, belonging, enhance employee engagement, inclusivity, and ethical behavior. They are servant leadership and transformational leadership. If companies, countries, societies want to thrive, then we define, cultivate, hire, and elect leaders who are servant leaders and transformational in nature. I want to thank you for joining me on this review of the functions of the servant leader. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below, and please like and subscribe to this page as well. And also feel free to provide suggestions on the leadership concepts and information you would like me to cover in future presentations. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for being part of the framework.